Okay.
No posters.
Okay, sir.
So in
Okay,
that
good
case,
morning. Yeah, good
no
morning to
posters
all of
also.
you. Good morning to all of you.
Yes.
Namaste. It is a privilege on my part to announce on behalf of Mizoram University that today in our webinar we have Professor Mrudul Nile, Professor of Civics and Politics and Officer on Special Duty, Institute of Democracy and Good Governance, State Election Commission, Maharashtra, India, as our guest speaker. And Professor Mrudul Nile will speak on from public policy to social policy, the need for paradigm shift in state policy. So before the procedure begins, I will try to check out what is the schedule for today. First, this brief introduction, then our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir will speak a few words, then my colleague, Dr. Lalpan Rate, Associate Professor, Public Administration, Mizoram University, will speak a few words about Professor Mrudul Nile. Then I will speak half a minute about the topic, then the actual talk of Professor Mrudul Nile, then question and answer session, and then formal vote of thanks. So, on behalf of the organizing team, it is my privilege to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, to formally welcome the guest and speak a few words. Sir.
Thank you, Professor Srinivas Pati, for inviting me to inaugurate the webinar. It is a great pleasure to have the young and dynamic Professor Mrudul here giving webinar on a very important topic that is public policy and social policy and paradigm shift in the state public policy and social policy. And it is a very pertinent topic for the present scenario of COVID-19. We are all suffering with COVID problem in all the states, and people are getting migrated to different places and getting unemployed. In such cases, what is the social policy to be adopted? And also, it is going to be one of the important points that how governments has to maintain this pandemic situation in the case of migrant workers and migrant labor. So it is a great topic, and I welcome Professor Mudel, and also we are very eager to listen to him. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So now we see our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Jagdish K. Patnaik is with us. So I request Professor Patnaik, who is also belonging to Department of Political Science, to speak a few words before we can start the proceeding. Patnaik, sir.
Thank you, Professor Pathi. It's rather my privilege to welcome my friend, Professor Mrudul Nile, whom I knew since the last 7 years or more. He's a young, dynamic professor, quite young actually, when he became full professor. And he has been the member syndicate of Bombay University. Bombay University is not a small university, it's a very huge university. And because of his dynamism, actually he got elected as a member of member syndicate. And we have seen him in various fora. At least I have interacted with him in various fora, particularly in UPSC. He is one of the important experts in not only political science, but also in international security and others. It's not a big deal, it's a confidential thing, I know, but I'm just revealing because I feel it privileged to share it amongst my colleagues over here. Another important thing about Professor Mrudul is that he has published very good articles, and which is actually, kind of everybody should go through. And when I came to know that Professor Mrudul will be speaking, I was really thrilled to listen to him, and I'm eagerly waiting how and what exactly is he speaking, because when he speaks something different from others. So with a lot of expectations, I welcome Professor Mrudul, and I really appreciate that you have accepted our offer. Particularly, Professor Pathi has been very good enough in liaising with you, and I should also appreciate Professor Pathi's effort. Thank you very much. Please. Thanks a
So
lot.
my pleasure, sir. Thank you. Thank you
Okay,
for
thank
your
you, sir.
kind words, sir.
Yeah.
I'm
So
just
next, it is my turn to request Dr. Laltan Puralte, my colleague, Associate Professor in Department of Public Administration, Mizoram University, to speak a few words about Professor Mudur Nile, today's guest speaker. Dr. Alte.
Thank you, sir. Just from all that we have heard, the little that we have heard about Professor Nile, we already know that he is a person that we can reckon with. And so it's a great privilege for me to introduce our esteemed speaker for today. And Professor Nile is currently a professor in the Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai. He is also a member of the Senate of the same university and has served as a director, students welfare also. He specializes in political process, public policy, and election studies. Professor Mridul Nile, as a Hayes Fulbright Fellow, has studied the national security policy making at the United States Institute on U.S. National Security Policy Making in the year 2011. In the United States, he has taken part in a number of seminars and conferences in Boston University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, National Defense University, as well as in some leading think tanks such as Center for Strategic and International Studies, American Enterprise Institute, Center for New American Security, etc. Moreover, he was also briefed at the United Nations US mission to the United Nations as well as the Pentagon. So Professor Nile has been awarded a scholarship from ICSSR to undergo a month-long international seminar on economic development for young scholars at Chinese Academy of Social Science, Beijing. He was also a part of the think tank forum between India and China in December 2016 and is associated with the Institute for Chinese Studies, which is an autonomous body sponsored by the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of Government of India. Among his numerous works, mention may be made of a few because we cannot come out with the entire list at this moment. So I'm going to mention just a few. He has got the major research project entitled Governance of Health in Maharashtra, Implications for Social Exclusion, which is sponsored by the ICSSR. He has studied on mapping food habits of tribal communities and use of VVPAT machines in Maharashtra. Professor Nile has worked on NOTA and conducted extensive survey to assess the voting behavior of citizens in all the 6 Lok Sabha constituencies of Mumbai during the 16th general election of 2014. He has also developed a certificate course on right to information, which is the first such course in India. And he has been associated with the innovative paper on psephology introduced in the University of Mumbai. Our speaker today has an extensive number of articles and books to his credit, of which again, I'm going to mention only just a few, which includes books such as the one entitled Right to Information and Intervention Towards Participatory Governance in Maharashtra, and Re-Engineering Grassroots Governance and Electoral Intervention. He has also convened numerous seminars and conferences, including Climate Change in South Asia and Sustainable Development Goals, a Dalit Perspective. Last but not least, Professor Nile is currently working on a major project sponsored by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, Government of Maharashtra, entitled Mapping the Food Habits of Tribals in Maharashtra. Now, from just this small gist I have given of the works that he has undertaken, we can already know that we are really fortunate to have Professor Nile amongst us and to speak to us. We welcome you, sir, and thank you for sparing your time to be with us and to speak to us. I am sure we are all very eager to hear you speak. And so therefore, I would like to hand over the platform again to Professor Srinivas Pathi, who has been the main person who has made it possible for us to have this webinar today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Laltan Puralte, for your brief but insightful introduction of Professor Nile, our guest speaker. So before Professor Nile can start, only one word from my side. In India, it is a common say in public fora that India has golden policy and plans, and implementation is still, but when it comes to monitoring, feedback, evaluation and reform, it is iron. So this is the way in India policy and planning, it moves from thinking to implementation and beyond. So only this word from my side. With this word, I don't want to be a bar in between the participants of this webinar and all of us and Professor Mudun Nile on the other side. So now, Professor Mudun Nile, time is yours. Kindly take your turn. Okay.
Sir, thank you. Thank you, sir. First of all, let me place my gratitude towards Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Rao. Uh, though the Pro Vice Chancellor, Sir Patnaik, sir, called me a friend, I mean, he is very senior to me. I would always learn from him, and it's always nice to be with him in whichever forums we meet. It's always a new thing that I learn from him. I still remember the way he reads the newspaper and how the questions come out of that particular newspaper. In fact, sir, just 2 days ago, I was just telling one of my friends that how the question should be, how you should formulate a question. And I was talking about Professor Patnaik in that sense. Professor Srinivas Pati has been a great help, support. I mean, always, met me with a lot of love and affection whenever we met in Delhi. And always that personal touch was somewhere over there. Sir, I am very, very grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. And Professor Ralte, thank you very much for a very, I don't know if I deserve this kind of an introduction, but since you have introduced me in that way, I will see to it that I work towards that and try to give my best for this particular lecture and webinar. Overall, I mean, to be very honest and frank with you all, I mean, Northeast has also always attracted me. I have been constantly visiting Tezpur University, and in Tezpur University, I was trying to have some kind of collaborative work. Every year, our students, most of the years, we try to see to it that we go to Tezpur and try and, see the adjoining villages, try and see what's happening in the military, military cantonments, and discussing with people over there. And we've been getting a very, very warm welcome over there in the Northeast. And of course, this is my first interaction in the University of Mizoram. So thank you very much. And I also thank all the viewers and all those people who have joined here for this particular lecture. I hope that I make sense in whatever I'm talking. For a very long time, we have been talking about public policy, and whenever we talk about public administration, I mean, there's a lot of influence of American system on public administration in India. But at the same time, I feel that there are certain shifts that we need to observe, and we need to change our policies also at given point of times. Now, what has happened is for a very long time, US came up with something called as, public policy and policy research. And therefore, what happened is we actually accepted that particular system, and we are going on and we are trying to bring in new things and new changes in public policy, and are trying to develop this particular discipline in India. But in last 10 years or so, the Americans have shifted their emphasis from public policy to social policy, because when we talk in terms of public policy, it is more so of from economic perspectives, but India needs more of social perspective. And that is the reason why I feel that whenever we talk about policy should be akin to people. Policy should have some kind of role to play with people, and therefore social policy is something that should be emphasized in India. And with this, I would take your permission to come up with my presentation that I have prepared for this particular lecture. Sir, is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Quite visible. Yeah. Also audible. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah. So I've titled my presentation as From Public Policy to Social Policy, the need for paradigm shift in the state policy. So the abstract of the presentation would be something like this: as to first we'll try to understand what social policy is, then we'll try and understand what were the social policy initiatives that came in pre-independence period. We'll be talking about public policy failures, and then we'll be talking about a paradigm shift to social policy. Roughly, I'll be taking 35 to 40 minutes for this presentation. Certain slides I'll just run through, but they are important, and therefore I have kept these particular slides in this particular presentation. Now, it is very important for us to understand why and what of social policy. See, social policy is very important because this becomes one of the most dynamic disciplines of social sciences, because we cannot say that social policy is away from economic policy, or it is away from certain things. Like take, for example, there are two very important incidents that have been taking place since last 2 days. First incident was of the rape or two rapes that happened in a particular state in India, and we find that we need to go to the roots of this particular problem, and we'll find that there is sometimes we find that question of equity plays a very important role, and therefore this particular that can be one of the reasons of this particular problem. Okay, today we find that there have been a lot of a different kind of social issues that are coming up, but we are treating those social issues with some kind of economic solutions. So everywhere economic solutions are not going to work. Okay, we need to create such kind of systems which will in a way empower the social categories, social communities, social groups in such a way that these particular groups come together and they have an amalgamated kind of a nature of nation. If you're talking about a nation, in that case, it should be looked in that particular terms. It also is very dynamic because the frontiers of this particular policy are, growing with the growth of society. Society needs some of the new things, and therefore this particular thing becomes very important. The origin can be traced back to the industrial revolution of society. However, the structured growth of public policy or social policy came in 1930s. So it is not a new discipline per se. It is quite an old discipline since 1930, but it was not an academically streamlined kind of a discipline. But today we are using it as a new discipline altogether. We have to look at what happened during the post-war period. Okay, initially it was a reformist era, because if you look at the period immediately after the war, it was all more of giving something to the people, and therefore some of the institutions like Bretton Woods system and all these kind of systems were talking about rebuilding the world. Okay, when you're talking about rebuilding the world cannot be rebuilt only and only with the help of economic resources. What is important is whatever economic resources that we have, these economic resources have to be percolated equally and equitably amongst different sections of people within the society. And unless and until we are able to do this, it is very difficult for us to have a very integrated kind of social systems. So when you're looking at social policy would play a role of integrating the society. I mean that is how I look at social policy, and therefore social policy becomes more important. Whereas if you're looking at a public policy perspective, from a public policy perspective will be more economic, will be more liberal, will be more will of course be more democratic, but then certainly it will have certain people, okay, who get the benefits of the resources. There are certain people who are left out from that particular benefits due to the structure of the society. So therefore, when you're looking at public policy and the social policies will try and bring in structural changes into the society. Because when we talk about structures, we find that some of these particular structures are very impenetrative. It is important for us to penetrate into these particular structures, bring in some kind of changes in those particular structures through some kind of policy from the state, and then only people will be more pro state. That is what will happen. So people will give up their parochial identities of being a part of a particular community or a particular or a particular social group, and they will get amalgamated, as I told you, in the national mainstream. So, so this particular discipline actually began in London School of Economics, which was associated with Labour Party, largely leftist, and they were also responsible for rediscovery of poverty, and were very critical and were committed to these particular things. So, social policy actually began with studying poverty. I would just like to bring in, since I'm talking about poverty over here, in Mumbai, actually, University of Mumbai, that is my department, and me, I'm the personal investigator. I'm the investigator for this. With IIT, we are coming up with something called as a hunger and poverty map for Mumbai, because Mumbai during this COVID situation was affected a lot, and it is important that we bring in some kind of interventions in Mumbai to see to it that the economy that it contributes to the nation, most important economy that is contributing to the nation, is again regenerated. And from that particular point of view, we are trying to map poverty and hunger in Mumbai. So similar kind of work, so this kind of work happened in LSE also. In 1980s, there was a shift towards a new right. We basically find that it was derived from neoliberal economic thinking. The process of welfarism became associated with the market. So, there was a shift. Earlier, people were talking about poverty. Now, people were talking about markets. There was also a shift in what services to do or how much it spends, but also preoccupations about outcomes and achievements. Okay. So what is the outcome of the state? What is the state achieving? These were some of the things that were brought in. And finally, though they were talking about the focus was on well-being, but then well-being of whom? Okay, these are some of the critical questions that came up in 1980s. So if you look at the social policy, the basic study, academic study of this particular social policy will be in this particular way, that is, economics plays a very important role, politics and sociology. Now, these are the three important disciplines which come together in order to make social policy. And if we have a good interaction with all of these particular with all of these disciplines, probably a better welfare state can emerge over a period of time. So when we try to define this particular social policy, this Donison, he is talking about, we are concerned with ill-defined but recognizable territory, the development of collective action of advancement of social welfare. Okay, so he says that we are really, really concerned with what kind of society and what kind of territory, recognizable territory we are in, and the development of collective action that we have at this point of time, which will be advancement for the social welfare. Our job is to identify and clarify problems within the territory. So the problem of social policy is to clarify the problems within this particular society and to drawing light upon any discipline that appears to be relevant and contributing when we can to solution of the problem. So this is what Donison says. He says that it is important that what are the social problems and what kind of interventions, what kind of solutions can we bring in for these particular social issues. That becomes one of the major issues. And in order to make a society more livable, in order to have some kind of harmony, in order to have prosperity in the society, these things become very important. In any society where poverty is there, probably you will not have that kind of social cohesion. So social policy looks at the social cohesion of the people and of communities, and it has to be supported with some kind of economic modelings, okay, through which probably percolation of wealth, equitable distribution of wealth, these are the things that are going to happen. And in a way, we are going to and in a way change the entire socio-political scenario of a particular community. That is how Donaldson looks at it. Now, if you look at the research areas of social policy, most of the areas would be dealing with health, education, employment, housing, and other institutions, and social security. While I'm talking about these issues, I mean, I had studied almost 80 PHCs, that is primary healthcare centers in Maharashtra, in the rural, in rural and tribal areas of Maharashtra. So when I look at this particular thing, I come across something very bleak picture comes to the fore, and this particular picture is about structural discrimination that happens. Some of these problems are like when I studied one of the districts, which is 98% tribal district. When we went there, we saw that doctors who are treating patients in these primary healthcare centers, they are generally coming from a BMS background. Okay. And when I went to a certain other district, which is not a tribal district, non-tribal district, and a bit cosmopolitan and a bit well-to-do kind of district, I saw that doctors over there are coming from MBBS background. So this kind of disparity, so this is a clear indication of, ill implementation of a social policy. So when you look at, and this was not with only one district, but I came across 3 districts, okay, which has got tribal population. And in these tribal populations, unfortunately, these kind of discriminations or these kind of, not exactly, imbalanced kind of policies are coming up. Similar is the case with social security, similar is the case with education. Employment scenario is not all that very good, and housing and other institutions. These are some of the things that are dealt with in the social policy. And you find that all of these things, okay, you need to have some kind of intervention in the educational system. Okay, we need more, and I mean, it is only 15% of people who are beneficiaries of the higher education in India. So why can't we? Do we? Can we really think that at least 50% of people will come in the higher education in India in next 20 years or so? If we are able to make some kind of interventions, these things will be possible. If what kind of employment? We probably we are still in that olden days where your employment is hereditary, okay, to a large extent. So these kind of things are very much in Maharashtra. When we look at certain communities, they are still doing the same kind of work. Okay, to give some examples, there is a community called as Bhangi community, which comes from Gujarat. And in all the municipal hospitals of Maharashtra, we find municipal hospitals in Mumbai, we find most of these people coming from the same community who are employed in the same kind of an employment. Okay, so this, we need to think about what kind of interventions, how these things are going to change. Will these people give up these particular occupations and take to certain other occupations? When it comes to housing also, we have ghettos wherever we go all over India. We have these kind of ghettos of different communities. Why can't we have some kind of place where people just give away their parochial identities and come together and start living together? Unless and until you cross your social barriers are crossed, you cannot go to a different kind of housing societies where people, a cosmopolitan housing ghettos will not be created. So it is important that these kind of things have to be brought into the state. Some of the intellectual preoccupations of this particular discipline include poverty, fairness, justice, dependency, incentives, freedom, adequacy, well-being, community, security, equality, equity, responsibility, efficiency, effectiveness. These are some of the things that become very, very important preoccupations of the entire intellectual discourse of social policy. Now, these are the things, if you actually look at the scenario of India, okay, in last 70 years up to today, you find that these are the issues that are somewhere haunting us. And I mean, have you been making enough progress in each of these issues? Is what we have to think. Okay, and if supposing say we are not able to make any kind of changes, if you're not able to bring in any kind of interventions in such kind of issues, then what is the problem? These are some of the very important things that we need to look at. And probably, on each of this particular intellectual preoccupations will have some amount of, if it is intervened, probably the country and the whole world will be a bit different. Now, social policy, what is social policy is not the description of services. That is, it is not public provision. It is not social work. It is not economics, politics, or sociology. Okay, it is to bring in, it is to synergize all of these things. It is to synergize public provisions. It is to synergize social work with sociology. It is to synergize public provision with politics and economics. Okay, so unless and until we're able to bring all of these things, we are not going to go ahead. So what are the economic questions of social policy? The social policy, it basically influences economic performance as a tool of macro and microeconomic management of austerity. Okay, like when we are talking about labor supply and demand, okay, how that particular labor supply and demand comes in, how human capital works, or what are the tools of evaluation of effectiveness and efficiency. These kind of things become very critical questions of economics when we look at it from the prism of social policy. Because unless and until we are, there are people, or there were prime ministers in UK also who were talking about all of these things like austerity and all, and based on that, we are trying to bring in a new social and economic policy systems. Okay, so politics questions. What are the politics questions of social policy would be? How are we making decisions? What kind of policy processes? Now, unless and until I'm a policy person, and I always tell my students that unless and until you are able to visualize the undercurrents, you should be able to see the undercurrents of the society. You should be able to see the undercurrents of the economy. You should be able to see the undercurrents. See, in the sense I'm talking about literally visualizing what is going into the society and how those particular undercurrents are interacting with each other to cause or to bring in a causal effect on different kind of processes, be it protest, be it going with government, be it consent, be it agreement. So these are some of the things that we need to look at, and we need to literally visualize these kind of things, how these political institutions are affecting the citizens. Okay, it is very important. Federal structures, that is distribution of revenue, liberty, equality, justice. I mean, the entire edifice of our Indian constitution, Indian state, rests on these three triology of liberty, equality, and justice. So when you're looking at if you're making a base of liberty, equality, and justice, and then just try to superimpose whatever we get to achieve all of these three goals of life, probably we may go towards some kind of social policy. Ambedkar very rightly, when he was talking about democracy also, he said that he is more concerned with the social democracy. Okay, and then if you look at the constitution also, he's talking about social democracy, and he's trying to make social justice as one of the value of the constitution. So when you bring both these two things together, probably the social systems would be largely different. Okay. Now, just to include this one more point over here, I would say that had Ambedkar been the planning minister during that time, okay, which he wanted to, he was very eager to be a planning minister. Had he been a planning minister, our policy initiatives or our planning commission would have been more social than economic, because today or when planning commission was working, it was basically working on economic indicators. Okay, rather than working on economic indicators, it becomes important to work on social indicators, because when you're talking about when initially we had a top down, trickle down kind of a planning top down approach, we find that we gave up that approach and we said, the approach of policy making should be from bottom up, from bottom to top. That is what approach should be there. So when you're trying to bring in this kind of approach, I mean, we need to also think about a social approach. We need to think about a social policy approach. And if you're going to social policy approach from bottom to top, in that case, what happens is you will have a larger social a social discourse will immediately emerge, which will say, what do people want at the bottom? The sociological questions are about the social structure, class, gender. Now, there are two characteristics of social policy. One is an empirical tradition of social policy, which talks about surveys of poverty, housing, social security, employment, and so on and so forth. Okay, this we have already talked about. And there are ideological traditions also. Some of these ideological traditions are commitment to welfare state, which Richard Titmuss is talking about. Okay, so that unless and until we are committed to welfareism, things will not go in the right direction. Similarly, exclusion inclusion discourse, and is also considered as a left wing bias. But it is not necessary that we have to look at it from a left wing bias always. I mean, certainly, there was this Robert Owens who, though he was an industrialist, he tried to bring in social policies and social incentives were given to people, which certainly made his enterprise look a bit different right amidst the Industrial Revolution. Now, what are the competing ideas about the nature of welfare state? That is anti-collectivist, it is free market, liberal, integrationist, and Marxist. So these are the competing ideas of welfare state. That is, it is anti-collectivist, free market, giving more emphasis to free market, liberal, integrationist, and Marxist. Well, I mean, just to, I'm just trying to bring this particular map in front of you, and I'm trying to talk about why social policy is very important amidst this current condition where you find that GDP is going down, where unemployment is really, really bad, where you have problem of hunger, where you have problem of drought, okay, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, this particular map basically talks about, this is a world population, population below poverty line. That is the hunger map of India. And if you look at these particular countries, which will tell you as to what number of people, what percentage of people are living in utter poverty. I'm just trying to superimpose this particular map over here, and this map is from John Hopkins John Hopkins Center for COVID Data. Okay, so if you look at some of these things, also you find that the global pandemic also is causing some kind of problems in similar areas. Okay. So this is how we look at these two things. Well, now a little bit of concentration on how the government's policy was in British India and how these particular things are really working. So this particular first image that I'm showing you, this one is of the Kasturba Gandhi Memorial Hospital. Now, Kasturba Gandhi Memorial Hospital during that time was called as Plague Hospital. 1892, we had suffered a worst kind of plague, and this particular hospital is the same hospital that was used as COVID care when the first case of COVID was found. The person was admitted to the same hospital. Okay, so it is a British imperial powers. They initiated this particular social policy in India. This hospital was built to deal with plague in 1896, and Dr. Choksi was the medical superintendent during this particular plague. And Dr. Gabriel Vegas, he discovered this particular plague, which was affecting people in Mumbai. Now there was a big what should you say, some kind of cyst people used to develop under their arms, and this is what was worrying people, and this is what Dr. Gabriel Vegas, he tried to Acacio Vegas tried to get in. Apart from this, there's a very important institute in Mumbai called as Hofkin Institute of Epidemiology Lab, which was again set up in 1899. This was Dr. Hofkin or Sir Waldemar Wolf who came, and Dr. Hofkin arrived in Calcutta in 1892. Later on, he came to Mumbai, and in JJ Hospital, there was a small little ward called as Ward number 305. room number 305, where he started off with a small little lab, a research laboratory, to see what the plague is. And later on, this particular doctor worked in a old Raj Bhavan, that is Governor's House, which was in Parel. Today, this particular Hofkin Institute is situated in the same place and is trying to do a lot. It is a PPP kind of a PPP managed institute, which is looking at the welfare of health in Mumbai. So what the point that I want to make is, whatever current things that are happening, I mean, is there an intervention? Over here, we see these particular interventions. So Hafkin's lab is there still since 1896. JJ Memorial Hospital is there. Kasturba Gandhi Plague Hospital is there. So similar kind of institutions were erected. So today, if I'm looking at some of these new interventions, we find that there are temporary hospitals which is not going to serve our interest, because there has to be a lot of what do you say? There has to be a lot of interventions from the government side to see to it that that health is taken care of, and certain other things are taken care, health, employment, food. These are the things that are taken care of by the government. Now, this is a Bombay City Improvement Trust and Bombay Development Directorate that we had. I mean, these are the old maps that we have. If you could see this particular part, these two red lines, these two red lines are nothing but, I mean, this particular place was kept, Princess Street and Standards Road, it was kept open so that the breeze from the sea could come into the entire city. So these places were kept open so that there is some kind of ventilation that was brought in the BIT. So these are some of the interventions that were brought in during that period. Yeah, so some of the so when you deal with some of these things, when you deal with social policy, what are the important things that we look at? We look at Human Development Index. We look at life expectancy, education, per capita income. Okay, now people today, we find that people have gone away from Human Development Index. People are talking about multidimensional poverty index, where people are addressing the issues of human development. So it cannot be always that people are talking only about human development index, but multidimensional index is playing an important role, and multidimensional index probably is a better indicator for telling what is the living standards of the people, what kind of poverty has been experienced by the population, and so on and so forth. There's in an Uncertain Glory, that was written by Drez and Amartya Sen. There is a chapter on healthcare crisis where they're talking about poor infrastructure services. Okay, it is. They say that it is astonishing to see that immunization program is not so well developed even now. I mean, I have, if I have some time later on after this particular presentation, I would like to show what has happened in what has happened about immunization in India. In Maharashtra in last since March. I have data till June. I have data from January to June, which tells that the immunization has gone down to as low as 4%. So that is a very that becomes a major concern for the next generation. Okay, we suffer a problem of stunted growth. These are some of the other things that we have been suffering from. So 69% of PHCs have only one bed, and about 30% enjoy regular maintenance. Okay, what happens to the other things? So when I'm talking about commitment to universal health coverage and so on and so forth, how are we going to transform these things? We have to stop believing against all empirical evidence that could be achieved through private healthcare insurance. Okay, and public provision of healthcare services has become a must. Okay, when you look at centrality of education, the role of basic education is in the process of development, and social progress is very wide and critical in this. Okay, read, write, count is not has an important impact on one's life, but then economic opportunities and employment. See, the major problem that we are suffering is about, is your education is giving you employment. Okay, so what is the employment scenario or employability criteria of education? So today everybody is talking about the outputs of education, what essentially outputs we are going to determine or derive from a particular course that we are giving to the students. I mean, the course that I'm running, okay, public policy course in my university, I see to it that my students get some kind of internships, and they're able to sponsor their own education. At the same time, they're able to gain skills. Okay, so some students work with election commission, some students work with tribal development departments, different kind of departments people are working with, to see to it that to gain hands-on experience on what's happening, and can become better policy makers. So when you talk about, I won't go into this much, but then just to tell you, when you're talking about public policy basically is problem assessment and monitoring, and before the fact and evaluation. I mean, as before the fact tool, and also evaluation. These are things about public policy. Public policy initiatives during COVID are absence of comprehensive policy, too much reliance on public policy based on economy. That is what I was talking about. Economy and effectiveness is missing somewhere, and there is no COVID-19 centric policy. So when you're looking at COVID, I think that we need to look at it from the COVID-centric policy also, how that particular policy is going to change. Financial packages are given is more of a financial reform, okay? Concentration of lockdown than containing the virus. So we are more concerned about concentration of lockdown. Okay, how many years are we going to, or for how many months? Every month we find that for next 1 month we are going to lock down. But then what are we doing to contain the virus? Okay, that becomes more important. Okay, medical facilities are inadequate, insufficient epidemiology centers. I mean, how many epidemiology centers do we have? Okay, if you go to a country like, I mean, we generally say that China is, this virus came from China, but then if you're looking at this particular thing, China has so many epidemiology centers. We have only one national virology center in Pune, or smaller epidemiology centers and virology centers. We need to have more of that, and more politics and less practice. This is what is the problem. These are some of the stimulus packages that came from different countries. Certain countries like US and all. I don't know if I can talk about that, but anyways, I mean, first of all, we'll talk about what CARE is in the US. Okay, we have heard about CARE. So it is Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security Act. Okay, this is, I'm talking in terms of US, where 2 trillion stimulus package was given to them. Okay, what was the payment protection program? These are some of the programs that they came up with. Payment protection program, that is every individual who is going to the job. Okay, and if they are losing on their employment, these people are getting some kind of doles or some kind of assistance from the government. Small Business Administration Coronavirus Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So small businesses are getting some kind of money or some kind of assistance. Small business experts are also Small Business Express loans. So people are getting small business loans. Also people are getting debt relief is there. So these are some of the things that were taken up by the US. The stimulus packages in in various countries. I mean, this is what the stimulus package in 4 categories were: direct benefit transfers, loan, grant, tax relief, and investments. So what I mean to say is, we are, if at all we are talking about economic stimulus packages and all of those kind of things, how do we go ahead doing that? The stimulus package in United Kingdom is over here, which talks about job retention schemes, payment of 80% of salaries, and these are some of the things that that were done by the US, by the UK. Okay, VAT payment by companies deferred until June 2020, interest-free cash for small businesses. These are some of the things, changes that were brought in. And if you look at all of these things, I mean, these are not economic benefits, but then these are economic interventions guided to change the social structure, trying to, to support the social systems of that particular country. Okay, now these are some of the problems that we're facing: migration, employment, social security, food, basic transport, housing, and health. How much has it affected? Urban informal economy is disrupted completely and is worse than demonetization today. Okay, all sectors, including tourism, travel, aviation, these are the problems that we have been suffering for a very long time. And this is why I'm talking about COVID is, I mean, COVID is going to be a major marker in the change of policies. It is going to be a marker in change of the social system. It is going to be a marker in the change of economic system. It is going to be a marker of, of various new things. And therefore, I think that we have to look at it from that particular perspective and have to bring in new changes into the complete new changes into the social systems and the governance policy, which should rely more on the government, I'll since I'm towards new social policy. Yeah. So when you're looking at the health, I think that comprehensive health systems should be developed. Citizens should be ensured with health services by the government. And firstly, education, employment, all of these things. I have a very, very clear-cut mandate, and I feel that we need to invest more, or public expenditure should increase in all the social security and all the social sectors of health, education, and employment. So because what happens is, unless and until you are able to pump in money into these particular sectors, these sectors are not going to, these sectors will not be these sectors will not gain importance. Okay, health, if you are making it private, health will be only for few people, or health sector will be available only for few people. Education can be a luxury at one point of time, and employment also will be. I mean, the state should negotiate with private enterprises for such kind of an employment. Okay, there should be. I mean, these are some of the suggestions that I have made to our government also, that the role of public hospitals should increase manifold. Each private hospital should be given a quota of few beds as per the government hospital norms. So if suppose we have some of the 5-star hotels like hospitals like Lilavati, in Lilavati hospital, if they are charging 2 lakhs from a particular person, they should also be charging 20,000 from a particular person, and the government should have a small little quota of at least 10% beds should be reserved for anybody who is coming from any section of society, and if he's near that, I mean, should be run on the similar lines as the municipal corporation of Mumbai is running its hospitals. So what happens is, I mean, I'm talking about, the available infrastructure, but then the same infrastructure should be made available to large number of people. I can tell you in Mumbai, when we studied, I mean, 67,000 people per dispensary. Okay, we have about 111 dispensaries all across Mumbai. Okay, municipal dispensaries, but then these are not being. I mean, nobody goes to these particular dispensaries. Not even 1% of people go. Okay, and for every 67,000 to 70,000 people, there is one dispensary. So I mean, this kind of social infrastructure is not going to help us. Okay, educational. I mean, majority of the educational institutions are private institutions in Maharashtra. So it is essential that, though grant-in aid system, but then in grant-in aid system also, it is essential that there should be large number of courses, okay, which are employable courses. They should be given to the people, okay, from the money that comes from the state. So it should be, I mean, in short, what I mean to say is that there should be public expenditure in this too. Decentralization is the most important. When you're talking about panchayat, municipalities, panchayats and municipalities should be more, working more now, because they are looking at the grassroots level. They have a direct connect with people, and these people should try to, and the people who are manning the panchayats and municipalities should have a direct connect with the people. So unfortunately, the state and the state government should devolve all its powers, give district planning boards, should be much more scientific in functioning. So that is not happening. District planning boards are not functioning in this particular manner. Increase in public finances is very important. So this was 100-day cap to be removed by Manrega. Manrega, there's number of people availing the scheme. There was a shortfall of 85% in the month of April. Just imagine. So these are some of the things that I wanted to flag off. These are some of the issues. I once again thank all the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Rao, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor Sir, Patnaik Sir, and Professor Pati Sir, Srinivas Pati Sir. Thank you for this particular opportunity. I'm really, really grateful.
Okay, Professor Nile,
yes.
Thank you so much. Before the formal vote of thanks, I wish our colleague, Dr. Altanpur Alte, she has jotted down a few questions. So please answer to those queries to be
Yes.
raised by Dr. Alte. Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Okay. So now I request Dr. Altanpur Alte, my colleague, to raise a few questions which Professor Mudur Nile would like to respond to. Dr. Altanpur.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, Professor, sir,
Yeah.
we have a few questions here
Yes, madam.
which are given by the participants.
Yeah.
One says that, is policy making possible
Yeah.
when we have illiterate political leaders such as in Jharkhand?
Okay. Uh, see, actually, you know, what I'm of the opinion is the politicians may be illiterate, but then the entire government is manned by a very elite bureaucrats. Okay,
Right.
the role of the bureaucrat is not just listening to the minister what the minister is saying, but then also give him those kind of inputs and tell him as to policy what kind of policy people need. Second very important thing is, you know, do these politicians and bureaucrats, do both of them know the nerve of the people? It is essential for a politician to understand the nerve of the people. What do people want? And accordingly, try and give some. See, politicians cannot make a policy, but then they can certainly direct certain things, that I want to give some certain things to the people. Okay, so based on that and based on the data, because a bureaucrat is in the office for almost 30 years, 25 to 30 years, there is no dearth of data for him, and obviously he can make very good policies, and I think most of the policies are made by the bureaucrats. So the only thing is, the bureaucrat should understand as to how to get these particular policy moved by the politicians. So obviously we can certainly, politician and the bureaucrat, if they work properly together, I mean, nothing is impossible.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I think that has made it very clear that things are possible.
Yeah.
And then the second question, sir, is what is the relevance of social audit in practice in your research for bringing a social policy?
Social audit is one of the very important aspects that we have to look at, because without a social audit, it is just not possible that we can go ahead with a social policy, because these are some of the at different period of at different times, we have to evaluate certain things. We have to go back and see what have we achieved in a particular policy, because unless and until we are not able to do that, how are we going to see policy? I am of the opinion that policies are not static. They're not static, they're very dynamic. Okay, so unless and until, I mean, we need to know where are we going wrong. We need to know what kind of beneficiaries do we have. We need to change the beneficiaries if we feel that the policy is going in a wrong direction. So all of those kind of things become very important, and therefore I think social audit is very critical in understanding. Like, take for example, Manrega cannot be successful if you're not getting into a social audit. So therefore, these are the things that I feel is very important.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So the third one is, we'll take a third one. Could you elaborate how social policy could play an important role in matters of displacement? How different is its approach from public policy?
Yeah, when you talk in terms of displacement, okay, we have seen a lot of people in Maharashtra also, okay, where 300 villages are displaced because of some a very big project. Or I have to look at it in a I'll give you some other examples also, where there is an atomic energy center, atomic energy power station that comes up, and people suddenly are asked to leave their places, leave their villages, and go to some other work, go to some other, settle in some other area. So displacement is certainly a major issue. But then when you're displacing and when you're creating new homes for these people, I mean, are you really trying to give similar kind of economic opportunities are available to them or not? That we have to understand. I mean, merely relocating people is not rehabilitation. okay, but giving similar kind of treatment also. Like, I'll tell you something. Mumbai, as you all know, is one of the biggest hubs of, is one of the biggest slum. Dharavi is biggest slum in Mumbai. Now, there is a program called as Slum Rehabilitation Authority, Slum Rehabilitation Program. And we have built some kind of buildings, 7-story, 12-story buildings, which are where people are rehabilitated in slums. But the problem is, though these people are relocated to some kind of buildings, what has happened is earlier these people used to make papads. Okay, those papads. And these people, the mother would make those papads, and a small little boy, after coming from school, would go and see to it that these particular papads are dried out over there. But what has happened is, unfortunately, they have lost on that particular employment. So when you're looking at, policy and social policy issues, you have to take into consideration what is going to happen to them economically. Now, another example that I'll give you is, we all know that there is a beautiful picture whenever Mumbai is shown nowadays. They show the Worli Sea Link. Okay, Bandra Worli Sea Link picture is always shown. It looks very magnificent to see that. But do you know that a lot of fishing communities were relocated from there, and they are thrown out more than 70 kilometers away from that particular place? And when you're talking about Worli, that was a fishing village. Okay, that is completely destroyed because there's a lot of drilling that has happened, and people don't get fishes over there now. Okay, to add to that, what has happened is, these people are thrown away from the city. They are out of the city. So marginalized people are absolutely out of the city. And this Mahim region or Worli region is the heart of Bombay. Okay, so this is what is happening. So when you're looking at policies, you have to see to it that those people who have been displaced, I mean, we have to see to it that their economic their economic well-being is not affected. Okay, we have to keep that particular thing in mind. Their incomes remain, if not less, if not more, at least they remain stable. If we are able to take care of these things, that will be called as pure rehabilitation. Otherwise, displacement means just throwing out people from the mainstream developmental projects. That is what I look at it from.
So the one, I think this should be the last question from my side. I mean, like, the last question that we're going to take from the participants. It says here that it is found that in some private sector organizations are avoiding the government norms and regulations. And what is your opinion on this in this regard?
See, private players will never ever, go with government policies. They will. I stay in a coastal area, so we have something called as CRZ. Okay, coastal regional zone, where development is not really allowed. But then people make some kind of changes in that, and see to it that that particular land is also availed, and that land is taken away by certain private players. So that's what, when I'm talking about, when in my presentation also, when I said that government hospitals should be there, along with the government hospitals, there should be some kind of private people, or other people, sorry, in private hospitals, there should be some kind of social initiatives where people from different communities also should be able to, or people from poor economic conditions should also be admitted to such kind of hospitals. So I think that if private players are coming in play, no problem, because we need our economy also to grow. But at the same time, these private players should have some kind of social face. Okay, they need to contribute at least something to something socially, in order to get into this particular, in order to get into such kind of business. And therefore, that policy, see, earlier what used to happen is, we used to have policies, and these policies were very broad policies. Okay, now we need to also talk about what these particular people, or what these private entrepreneurs should be able to do and should not do. These kind of things should be made very clear. If at all, if you're into such kind of business, like, take for example, today everybody needs a data. Okay, every student needs data, and not all students will have that much of money. So we need to talk to all those private operators of internet and internet service providers, that for students you have to give data in just 20%, 25%, and wherever you want to charge, you can take that particular and you can charge over there. But then for at least students, you should make this particular data available at 20, 25%, so that their education is not suffering. Because this is a new normal that people talk about today, that everything is going to be on data. And those who have data, I mean, right from the beginning, we've been talking about this. Those who have data are powerful. That is, knowledge is power. So internet also gives knowledge, and in order to empower people, we need to give some kind of concession, and this should be rooted through the state. The state should intervene. State intervention is very important for the social upliftment of all the people and the entire country together.
So I think, although I said last,
Yeah.
maybe we can just add this question, because we have many relevant questions that are
Mhm.
coming up,
Mhm.
and we can just this add to the previous question. Add this question to the previous one.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think private organizations work with uh, equally better performance and accountability in their job for the society?
See, private entrepreneurs, private enterprises are profit motivated. So obviously, I would just say that there is a little less commitment to social development. Okay, but in terms of economy, that is important, and indirectly that will help the social development if those resources and that particular money that is accumulated through that particular profit is used for the upliftment of the downtrodden, social class, and general public, and giving general social infrastructure, providing social infrastructure to the people.
I am seeing that many of the participants are very interested, and they're coming up with a number of questions. But in spite of that, I think we cannot take all the questions this time because of the time frame that we have.
I think if
So I
anybody
think,
has questions, they can also mail to me and I will respond to them on the mail.
Yeah.
oh, thank you, sir. That would be really convenient. So maybe this one last, the real last, I think,
Sure,
should come
absolutely, no
here.
problem.
And from my side, it says that society today is facing several problems. And according to social policy, how would it be possible to achieve sustainable development in the present scenario? And how can we make the local governments effective to bring about the sustainable development?
Yeah, this is a very important question,
Yeah.
and something very close to my heart also. See, when we're talking about sustainable development goals, okay, 2030, they've been talking about, hunger, education, nutrition, all of these kind of issues that they are talking about. Poverty, okay, a world should be poverty free, and all these kind of things. But then if you look at since March 2020, you find that this particular problem is becoming more and more graver. It is more grave problem than ever. Now, when you're looking at social policy basically talks about and it pinpoints at these particular issues of poverty, unemployment, hunger, these kind of things. I would just like to talk about what the government used to do. When government came up with this particular policy of PDS, public distribution system. Okay, government aimed at hunger-free India. People should not, nobody should sleep without food. That is what was the idea. But what has happened over a period of this, again, whatever data that I'm talking to you is from my research, what I have gone on the field, based on that I'm telling you. In last two generations, you find that there is a lot of stuntedness that has come into the life of these particular marginalized communities. The reason is they are sustaining only on that particular food that has been provided by the government, okay, through the PDS. And whatever original food that they used to eat earlier, ragi and all those kind of things, they've stopped eating that particular food. They've stopped growing that particular food. Okay, so therefore, when you're talking about social policy, I mean, social policy strikes a balance between the economic and the social. So therefore, when you're looking at sustainable development, of the community, I mean, it becomes a very, very, very major, it becomes a very broad picture. When you're talking about sustainable societies, what do you mean by sustainable society? Sustainable society would mean that nobody should sleep without food. It means that equality. It means everybody should be treated with respect. All of those kind of things together. So I'm talking about economic and social indicators together. So when you look at these kind of sustainable problems of sustainability of the society, I think we have to integrate these two indicators, social and economic indicators, and see to it that people are getting the best out of these particular indicators. That is what I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for the very enlightening clarifications that you've
Thank
given to the doubts and questions.
Thank
So
you.
I think with that, we will stop the question and answer part, and I will hand over the platform again to Professor Pati.
Sure. Thank you.
Sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Dr. Alte. Professor Mridul, we have got few questions in mail. Already
Yeah.
you have answered a few. So
Uh-huh.
can I take a couple of them?
Oh, absolutely, sir.
Okay. Number one, some say, what is your preference, pan-Indian policies or state-centric policies? Because in case of social policy, you say it's a paradigm shift. So what is the preference mode? Is it the pan-Indian social policy or state-specific social policy?
Okay. Sir, see, our Indian system is such that there are certain policies that emerge from the center. So we cannot deny those kind of policies. But then the implementation of those policies in different kind of states has to be done keeping under consideration the demography of that particular state. Because if we are not able to, look at the demography, and we just said it's like a blanket implementation of something, probably that will cause more problem, and the output that is expected from the central policy. So centrally we can certainly plan a policy, but then execution should be at the central level. And I would go even more lower. I would say that proper implementation should be at the grassroots level. Because at the grassroots level, what happens is everybody knows what is the need of a particular family, what is the need of that particular individual. And I think that is how we should look at it. I mean, there are certain parameters certainly can be given by the central government. Some more parameters, a little bit more parameters at the state level can be given by the state. And at the lower level, at the implementation level, at the right in the bottom, I think a more enlightened administration is essential. Because at the grassroots level, again, the problems will be a bit different. So I am of the opinion that at the grassroots level, an enlightened leadership is important. Okay. What Plato used to talk about, philosopher kings. Okay, those kind of people should interact with the people, and the entire thing should be based on the idea of justice.
Okay. One more question here.
Yes.
Pre-COVID and post-COVID, the
Yes.
situation remains the same in terms of resource mobilization, resource generation. So
Yes.
what is your view as a researcher in public policy cum social policy? What should the state do in this present scenario when resource generation is itself a big issue? Then how to mobilize and how to distribute the resources and manage? So what is your view?
Yes, sir. I would rather say that, as I told in my lecture also, that public expenditure is most important, sir. See, I mean, I've been talking this since 2019. Okay, that unless and until people have money in the hand, unless and until you are able to increase consumption, we are not going to get resources. And that particular resources, whatever through consumption, whatever resources are developed, okay, are generated, that particular resources have to be reused for the development of people. That is what my strategy would be. I'm not an economist, but then I've studied a little bit of economics, and based on that, I would say that we should in a way enthuse people to spend money. We should enthuse people. Now, sir, what has happened is, at this point of time, sometimes we are people have given up on their 3 meals a day. In Mumbai, when we studied, we saw that people are having only 2 meals. People are not, small children are not having milk. small children are not having fruits for a very long time. Okay, so what has happened is, so our consumption levels have gone down. So we need to give money to the people, sir, to increase their consumption. And if we are able to increase the consumption, obviously, then only we'll be able to generate more resources. And this particular resource generation will certainly percolate and will try to bring more equitable distribution of resources.
Okay, thank you. The real last, uh, in Mumbai in general and anywhere you have studied the role of civil society organizations in
Yes.
dealing with post-COVID, because you have pointed out the glaring gaps.
Yes, sir.
So what they have done to help the mitigate the right of the people and to have the gap filled in when the government or the institutional help is lagging behind. So what is your study in this area? How civil society groups, even enlightened individuals, media, they have come in?
Sir, I have a very excellent example with me. There was this very young gentleman in Mumbai, okay, and this person has supplied 40 lakh meals to the people during COVID, okay, and he's at this point of time also he is supplying almost 2,000 meals a day. Sir, I mean, there are public spirited individuals who are coming out and trying to help people. There was a very important IS officer. This IS officer also, came out, went to some of these particular people who lost their jobs, and in his personal capacity, he went with a truck full of food grains, went there and give it to them and gave to people. So one more very interesting thing that I would like to bring in over here is that I saw that there are a lot of local individuals, sir, young people, okay, who are working locally. They may not have political positions. They are not even engaged with any kind of civil society organization, but yet they feel that they should try and help people, whoever is there in that particular area. And we have seen such initiatives in smallest of places. So these things are there. Obviously, when you're looking at the civil society organizations with whatever kind of resources they have been coming out and trying to help people. So obviously in such kind of situations, what has happened is humanity is playing an important role, and all those organizations like the civil society organizations which have an humanitarian perspective, okay, of with which they have come up, okay, that is really playing an important role and helping people a great deal. So here what happens is, we know that there is a limitation on the government. We know that the government cannot reach the last man somewhere in one of the most distant districts of Mizoram. So what will happen? So somebody from adjoining district will certainly go and try to help that particular family. And this kind of humanitarian approach is being seen very much in India today. And I think that we need to rebuild these kind of relationships, okay, and give a policy input and policy push to such kind of initiatives, to have a collective endeavor to fight against such kind of problems.
Okay, Professor Mudal,
Yes.
I wish, I dream we continue like this for long. But unfortunately, today we have so little time, because
Yes.
today after this we have another very important webinar on MOOCs, on online education.
Oh.
So we would like to continue, but still, as you have already suggested very kindly, the
Yes.
questions, queries, whatever they will post to you, and if they forward to us, we can give it to you.
Oh, sir,
So
please.
before I go for formal vote of thanks, only two major takeaways from today's webinar.
Yes.
Number one, the fantastic speech, talk, presentation, and question answer session by Professor Mudul Lile. This is number one. And number two, most important, what my Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao told just now, that let us have collaborative effort with
Yes.
Mizoram University and
Yes.
University of Mumbai, and
Certainly.
to be the pointsman there, we will be here only.
Yes,
So
sir.
what we do, let us have a program so that a center for public policy study and research.
Yes.
So the name could be decided, because in this particular nomenclature, already I have searched. There are 2, 3.
Yeah.
Very, very typical, exact same name. There are institute. So we will work out what is the best possible nomenclature, and we will do that.
Sure.
And after that, already I have been given indication that we are going for another very important webinar. So on behalf of organizers, I have to say a big thank you to my Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, my Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Patnaik, our today's guest speaker, Professor Mudul Nile, my servant should say, Professor Patnaik, yeah, please say.
No, just I want to acknowledge mesmerizing presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And the lecture was really, I am really spellbound.
Thank
And
you,
it's wonderful. And actually, I really appreciate your effort. And it is really enriching for all of us. And I'm really very happy.
Sir, thank you.
That wonderful job, wonderful presentation.
Thank you,
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Professor.
okay, thank you, sir. So, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, Honorable Pro VC Professor J.K. Patnaik, my esteemed colleague Dr. Laltan Puiralte, all my colleagues in the university, our ICT team, and particularly Mr. Suraj, the person who is working 24 hours for these webinars and online activities, and all the esteemed participants and the people associated with the success of the webinar. On my personal behalf, on behalf of the team and the university, I say big thank you and my gratefulness to all of you. And we hope, Professor Nile, this formal interaction with the university system will continue, and beyond our friendship, it will be another formalized relationship when we really go for a Center for Public Policy Studies and Research in collaboration with University of Mumbai, and we will be the organizer, Mizoram University. So with your kind permission, I think it's a time to say big thank you, and we meet again. Namaskar.
Thank you so much. Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir. Patnaik, sir. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, sir. Thank you all. Yeah.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. One of the best seminars.
Okay.